Hello, friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. Okay, we're going to do something a little bit different today. You may recall that when I moved here, I brought some plants from my house in California with the hopes of helping me restart the growing process once I got into a house. You may recall that those plants included 3 palm trees, a couple of plumeria, a cactus, and a maple sapling tree. This maple sapling tree, I almost lost it yesterday because it's just been so hot and I just can't seem to water it enough to keep it going. Here's the problem. When I started growing that thing, I didn't really expect anything was going to happen. I grew that literally from seeds. And I didn't expect that anything was going to come of it, so I didn't really put any real effort into doing it right. Basically, I had a pot of dirt that had come from the yard in California that was just that something else had died in. I basically just decided I was going to try growing a maple tree in that pot. I didn't really even replace the soil. The problem is the soil in the yard that they put into my yard when they first built the house was the cheapest grade of soil that they could get. It had no real nutrients in it. It had no real draining power. It was essentially just clay. And it's hard as a rock. I know. I remember the first time I had to dig through it when I put the sprinklers in the yard. I had to get a big nasty digger bar because I couldn't use a shovel to dig it up because the ground was so hard. Well, that has caused a problem with this tree because while the tree has done all right, and it does okay if it gets constant water, which keeps that clay lump moist, if you only water it periodically like I've been doing now because I don't have sprinklers, what ends up happening is the water just runs off to the side and it runs down the side of the pot between the dirt and the inside of the pot, and it just all runs out of there in a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repot that today. I'm going to put it into some really quality soil. I can't do anything about that ball in the middle because that's always going to be there. But if you give it quality soil outside, the roots will grow into that, and hopefully that will hold some more water and make it possible to keep this thing alive. So let's go to Home Depot. Oh yeah, you may remember this thing too. This continues to thrive. Now, since this isn't going to be a permanent replacement, just something to park it in until I get ready to put it in the ground, I'm just going to get something real cheap like this. This is a nice 5-gallon bucket that'll work perfectly. In fact, I probably could have just gotten an orange bucket, but those are kind of ugly and they don't have the holes in the bottom for draining, so we'll stick with this. So the next question always comes, what kind of soil are we going to get? Because they got soil that's specialized for different stuff. This is for instance, this stuff is just for small plants, stuff in pots, maybe elevated beds and stuff like that. I need something that's actually designed for trees. And they got some of that over here. So we're going to go with this Miracle Grow garden soil because it specifically says it's for trees and shrubs. So that's what we're going to get here. We're going to get one of these. All right, so we're back from Home Depot. I've actually decided I'm going to do everything inside the house today because even though that's not normally how it's done, it's still like 103 out there, and I don't really want to be dealing with that today. And I'd rather just put a little newspaper on the ground, do this inside in the air conditioning, than go out and bake in the sun, or otherwise I'll end up looking like that thing did yesterday. So what I've done is I got it all in here. We've got the nice new 5-gallon pot. We've got a cubic foot and a half of plant tree soil, and we've got the tree that we're going to move. So since the pot that the tree is coming out of is smaller than the one that the tree is going to go into, I got to put a little bit of soil in there at the beginning. So I'm going to fill up this tub about halfway with my soil. So I got the soil about halfway up, maybe a little bit more because it's going to compress a little bit when you put the plant on top of it. So it's a little higher right now, but that's okay. It'll settle over time. So I've also gone in and cleaned a little bit of the dead foliage out of here. Some of it is stuff that leaves that have kind of dried out because it hasn't gotten the water it really needs. The rest of it is just stuff that's kind of fallen on it in the yard because there's unfortunately a tree in the yard that around this time of year has these really beautiful flowers on them, but once the flowers are spent, they all kind of fall off, and it's kind of made a mess of all my plants. Now normally you have to kind of wrap the side of the pot a little bit just to get everything to kind of let loose. Since this is hard soil, I'm actually going to use a rubber mallet and kind of beat on the side of the pot just a little bit, just to kind of break everything loose, so that when I pull it out, it comes out easy. We'll kind of tip it on its side a little bit here, wrap it on the bottom also. And hopefully with a little luck now you can grab the branch just right next to the bottom here, and it will just pop right out. And of course it isn't. It's gripping in there really good. So I think I'm going to have to cut this thing out of here. So I tipped this thing on its side, and it's got an old box knife that I'm going to use to do this. Now you got to be very careful when doing this for two reasons. One off, this thing is sharp, and this thing will go through you as easy as it goes through the pot. But also, over the time, the roots have kind of grown to the edge of the inside of the pot, and so there's going to be a lot of concentration of roots right on the edge here. And so if you cut too deep, you could kill the roots, so you don't want to do that. So I'm just going to take this kind of real slow, and just might take me a couple shots going through here. But I'm taking it slow. Okay, now I'm through the plastic. I can feel it. And so I'm taking it really slow just to make sure that I don't damage anything underneath. Alright, and then often what I'll do is I'll roll it around and I'll go to the next little drain hole and do the same thing. The first one is just kind of to set a groove in there so you can kind of go through it slowly, and then you just kind of follow the groove a couple times until you fill it, until you're through. And I'm through now. I can feel it all the way to the end. Make sure the groove goes all the way to the drain hole here a little bit. There we go. At this point now it's going to be a lot easier to get this thing out of here. And I can just kind of pull it out and stretch it around here. And now things should just pop right out. So once again, I'm going to grab the tree right at the bottom there, wiggle it around a little bit, and into the pot it goes. Get this thing out of here. Killed a couple branches, but that happens. Want to get this thing in here level pretty much. Now you may ask, how is it that if you planted it by seed that you got it so off center in the pot? Well, it all starts with how it was that this started. I actually planted about 100 seeds in here, and basically what the trick is, you wait for them to turn into sapling or into little seedlings, and then when you're ready to pick one, you choose the strongest one and you basically pull all the rest of them out. Well, unfortunately, the strongest one was right on the edge, so that's where it ended up. It really doesn't matter at this point because it isn't going in here for looks. It's going in here to be kept alive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it a little bit more to the center, and then we'll just kind of fill in the gaps around the edge with the soil. So I ended up pulling a little of the foliage off of here while I was working on this. That happens. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to push that back into the pot, and it'll become fertilizer for the tree. So that isn't so much a bad thing. And then just going to grab the bag of soil. I got a little plastic coffee cup here, and I'm just going to scoop the soil out of there and push it into the cracks here. Scoop it around with your hands just to make sure you get it everywhere. You want to kind of get it to fill in well. Since it's kind of coming out in clumps a little bit, that's sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge. It's going to get a bunch of soil in here right now, and then I'll kind of maneuver it around with my hands. Pack it in there pretty tight, because you don't want to pack it in there so it turns into a diamond or anything. But what you want to do is get it in there enough, because you don't want the soil to settle too much as time goes by. Just kind of pushing it into the seam between where the old dirt was and the side of the pot. And you know why we put the newspaper out here, right? The beauty of what this is going to do is that the new soil is going to hold the moisture in there, and so that the root ball of the nasty clay soil in there can get wet. And once that happens for a little while, then the seeds, or then the roots that are right on the edge there, will begin growing into the new soil. Like I said, if I was going to leave this in here, I probably would have put it in a larger pot, but this is just something to hold it now until we put it into the ground in a year or two. And so since we're going to be replacing it into the ground at some point, there's no reason putting it in a really large pot. And now that I got pretty much all the holes filled up here and packed in pretty good, I'm just going to kind of put some more soil around the edge here, cover up all of the old nasty clay that we had in there. Because if you go above that a little bit, you don't want to go above it too much, because you don't want to keep raising the soil level of a tree like this, because eventually you'll damage the tree. But if you go just a little bit above where it is right now, it'll be all right, because what will happen then is, as any settling occurs, some of the dirt on the top will kind of fill into the gap. And there we go. Now all I gotta do is take it out. Well, first thing I gotta do is wash my hands. But next thing we gotta do now is just take it out and give it a real good thorough watering, and we are good to go. Now you may recall that about a week ago I moved the palm trees to the other side of the yard because they'll get better sun out there. They won't have that tree with all the flowers dropping debris on them all the time. And there's like a garden hose spigot out there. I think I'm going to move this one out there for the same reason, because that way I can make sure that every time I'm watering the palm trees, I'm also giving this thing a good drink. The other plants I have, the plumeria and the cactus, they're doing fine where they are, so they can stay where they are. But this needs to be watered a little bit more regularly. So I think we're going to be able to save this thing. It looks a little nasty right now, but I think it's going to survive. It'll do better than this way. So I hope you found that interesting or educational, or maybe even a little both. I do know at this point that I believe that tree's going to have a better chance of surviving now. It looks pretty ratty now, but we're kind of coming to the end of the season anyway. It's going to start dropping its leaves in in a couple months anyway, and then it'll regrow again, and I think it'll be off to a better start. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.